And they hadn't forgotten. Weeks later, the mail truck rumbled up the snowy road, a rare sound in winter. Inside were a few newsletters, a trail cam catalog, and a note, handwritten, from a conservation officer she hadn't spoken to in years. "Next time you have a wild visitor," it read, "call us. Though truthfully, I don't think any of us could have done what you did." She smiled, slid the note into the pages of her letter, then stepped outside. The crate had long been packed away. The bowl sat empty, but in the trees, the wind stirred, gently brushing branches with a whisper, and for one brief moment she heard it again, a trill, rising and soft, a mother's voice, a goodbye, or maybe a thank you. Footprints in the snow. Not all love is meant to stay. Some love passes through. Quiet. Whole. Forever. Winter deepened in Trinity National Forest. Snow thickened, blanketing every inch of earth with silence. For most people, isolation would have been a weight. But for Hannah, it had never felt so. Full no more porch visits, no more chirps in the dark, no glowing eyes at the tree line. But the prints were still there. Not every day, not even every week, but just enough. When morning light hit the clearing just right, she'd spot them. Faint, side by side, winding through the trees. Never near the porch again. But close enough to be seen, close enough to say without saying, "We're still here." She began keeping a journal. Not notes on patterns or data. Those had filled pages once. This was different, more intimate. She wrote about trust, about release, about the difference between saving something and simply offering safety. Each entry began the same. Twig and his mother passed through again last night, even if she hadn't seen them because they had, in a way. They always would. Their story had settled into her bones. That spring, as the creek behind her cabin began to thaw, Hannah planted a wildflower garden just beyond the porch. Not neat, not manicured. A soft riot of color, meant to grow freely, return on its own terms. A reminder of what had once curled into a crate and looked her in the eyes. She called it Twig's Corner. When visitors came, rare though they were, she told the story. Never with spectacle, only with reverence. One afternoon, a local ranger stopped by with a young intern. They brought a drone to track deer and had heard whispers of the bobcat whisperer in the hills. Hannah laughed at the nickname. She didn't correct it. When the intern asked wide-eyed, "Did the mother really come back for him?" Hannah paused. She looked toward the tree line and simply said, "Yes." And she didn't come back angry or afraid. She came back with trust. That was the real miracle. The intern scribbled as if recording scripture. Hannah just smiled and sipped her tea. Because for her, it wasn't about being remembered by people. It was about remembering what mattered. That. Sometimes the wild knocks, and if you listen, really listen, it might step inside long enough to change you. When the wild remembers you, some stories don't end. They echo. By midsummer, the forest had transformed. Snow gone. Wild grasses and ferns brushed her boots as she walked to the creek. The garden bloomed. Lupines, goldenrod, California poppies. A kaleidoscope of life where once there had been only frost and silence, but no more tracks. Not in dirt, not by water, not near the porch. Weeks passed, then a month, then two. She kept checking. Not from fear, from hope, but even hope she knew must someday let go. Eventually, she stopped waiting. They were gone. Twig had grown. The mother had healed. They had returned to the wild edges, far beyond any human touch. And still, she didn't feel left behind. She felt remembered. Because the forest doesn't forget who it trusted. One night in late July, she lit a fire at the edge of the clearing. The sky above shimmered with stars, vast and clear. She didn't build the fire out of need. She built it as a ritual, a quiet offering. She sat alone beside the flames, wool blanket around her knees. In the center of the fire ring, she placed something. Small, the towel Twig had used, frayed and soft from months of careful folding. As it curled into smoke, she whispered into the dark, "You were never mine." But thank you for letting me love you." The flames danced higher, stirred by unseen wind. She watched until it was gone, ash on the wind. Weeks later, a letter arrived from the ranger station. Inside, just a photo, grainy, long-distance trail cam, a date, coordinates, 2 bobcats, one large, one smaller, side by side. Over 30 miles from her cabin, walking the ridge near the edge of protected lands. No note, no signature, just that image. Hannah held it in trembling hands, not from weakness but from the flood of recognition. She pinned it above her desk, near her maps, her garden notes. Not a trophy, a memory, a reminder that for one brief season she had been part of something wild, something real. It had changed her more than any study, any solitude, any quiet year tucked away. She was no longer just the woman who left the world behind. She was the one the wild once trusted. And that, she knew, would always be enough. At its heart, this story isn't just about a woman and a wildcat. It's about what happens when we choose compassion over fear, patience over control, listening over speaking. Hannah never tried to tame the wild, never asked for anything in return. She simply offered what she had: warmth, silence, trust, and in doing so, became part of something ancient, something extraordinary. In a noisy world, we often miss the quiet knocks and the soft cries, the subtle signs. But sometimes the smallest gesture, a bowl of milk, a quiet porch, can begin a story you'll carry forever. So when the wild knocks at your door, will you open it, even just a little? At Paw Prints and Stories, we don't share tales to tell you how to feel. We share them to remind you empathy, even toward the unknown, has power. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you pause, then you already carry the heart of this channel. Stay curious, stay kind, and remember the wild remembers you too. She began to talk to him, not in coos or baby voice, but soft and calm. "You've got someone watching over you, little guy," she murmured one evening, crouched by his crate as he licked his paws after eating. "I'm just the in-between." Twig blinked, up at her, slow and steady. His ears flicked, but he stayed. Each night, the camera showed the same scene. The mother appeared between 2 and 3 a.m., never closer than 20 feet, never prowling, just watching. One night, Hannah caught a frame where the adult bobcat sat facing the crate, still as stone, eyes fixed on the slats, watching her cub sleep. The feeling was undeniable. Intelligence, restraint, heartbreak. This wasn't a predator. This was a mother waiting for a door to open. Hannah wrestled with the choice. Return Twig too soon and he might freeze, starve, or be taken by another predator. Wait too long and he might lose his instincts. Trust humans. A death sentence for a wildcat. So she chose a middle path, a gradual return. Each day she moved the crate a little farther from the porch, 5 feet, then 10, then near the trees. Each time she set down a fresh bowl of food and sat nearby, quiet, watching. Twig, small but alert, never bolted, but he explored a bit more, watched birds, swatted lazily at pine needles drifting down. Then one evening something shifted, just before dusk. The crate sat near the edge of the clearing where the shadows began. Twig had eaten, curled up. Then he stirred, sat up, ears pricked, body still but alert. He stared into the trees. Hannah turned. There she was, the mother. Not hidden this time. Fully visible 20 feet away. Golden coat brushed by the last light of sun, breath curling in the cold. Still. Coiled. Calm. Her eyes weren't on Hannah. They were locked on Twig. Twig chirped. A short, high-pitched sound, not quite a meow, not a growl. Something in between. I see you. The mother blinked, then melted back into the woods. But Hannah didn't need the footage. She knew. The message had been sent. She's ready. And so is he. You feel it in your bones, that moment before the wild steps close. The storm came fast. Heavy gray clouds rolled over the treetops like a tide. By afternoon, thick flakes fell, blanketing the clearing. Hannah moved the crate back beneath the porch, shielding Twig from the worst. That night he was restless. Pacing, nose pressed to the crate's slats, tail flicking. "Something's coming, isn't it?" she whispered. By nightfall the wind screamed through the trees, the sky black. Hannah stoked the fire, poured warm milk, double-checked every layer of the crate's insulation. Then, sometime past midnight, a sound. A thump. Soft, but solid. Weighty. She crept to the window. Frost crusted the glass. At first, nothing. Then she flicked on the porch light. And there she was. The bobcat. Full grown. Right there beyond the steps. Bigger than the camera showed. Her fur a mix of gold and charcoal dusted in snow. Her paws wide, solid. But there was a limp in her left foreleg. Her ribs, less stark now, still peeked through her coat. But it wasn't her injuries that stopped. Hannah cold. It was her eyes. They didn't glow with threat, didn't dart with suspicion. They stared only at the crate. Twig was still. Not from fear. He chirped again. A soft sound. The mother twitched her ears, tilted her head, then took one step forward. One paw on the bottom stair. Hannah's body locked. Every instinct screamed. To move, to retreat. There was no barrier, no glass, no weapon. Just space. But she didn't move, and neither did the bobcat. Instead, something else happened. She lowered herself. Not to pounce, but slowly, gracefully, to the ground. Ears forward, eyes soft. Then a sound. A trill. Low, almost melodic. Not a warning. A greeting. Twig pressed his nose to the slats, paws kneading the towel. Then he answered. A small, unsure chirp. The mother responded. Another trill, softer this time. Communication, recognition, reunion. Hannah didn't breathe. Her grip on the doorframe whitened her knuckles. Slowly she crouched just inside. No words, no gestures, just witness. What had been broken, severed by cold, by distance, by luck, was knitting itself whole again. The mother rose, stepped closer, now only 3 feet from the crate. She didn't snarl, didn't threaten, just leaned in, brushed her nose against the wood. Slats, pressed her face to the edge, a whine, gentle, urgent, a mother's call. Twig chirped in return, pressed back. The stillness that followed was sacred. Then the bobcat turned to Hannah. Their eyes met. The world paused. The look wasn't challenge or curiosity. It was older than that. A thank you. Then the bobcat turned and vanished into the storm. But, this time, not alone. Twig pawed at the crate's door. Hannah, breath shaking, stepped forward. She opened it. No commands, no hesitation, just permission. Twig stepped out, one paw in the snow, then another. He paused, looked back, then trotted into the trees. The crate rocked gently in the wind. Empty. And Hannah, alone beneath the porch light, let the tears fall, not from grief, but something deeper. The wild heart knows kindness. Witnessing nature is one thing. Being trusted by it, something else entirely. By dawn, the storm had passed. The forest held a hush, branches groaning beneath fresh snow. Hannah hadn't slept. She didn't try. Curled in a blanket near the window, she watched the tree line. Nothing moved. No prints. No shadows. Just silence. The crate sat empty. A small indent in the towel, the only trace he'd ever been there. It was over. Or her part was. She stepped outside as the first orange streaked the sky. The cold bit deep. The kind that made you feel small but fiercely alive. She knelt beside the crate. Brushed her hand over the cloth, still faintly warm. Then she saw them. 2 sets of tracks. One large, steady. The other small, bounding, side by side, leading away into the trees. Her heart ached. Not with loss, but something richer. Completion. Closure. Twig had never been hers. He belonged to the forest, to his mother, to the wildness inside him. She had only been a bridge, a witness, a brief chapter in a much older story. She looked up at the sky, closed her eyes. Be safe, little one. she whispered, "and thank you." 3 days passed. Then one afternoon, as she chopped wood behind the cabin, a rustle. Quiet, intentional. She turned, heart stuttering. Just beyond the tree line, two forms emerged from the brush. Twig, stronger now, more sure-footed, stood. Alert, ears flicked forward. Beside him, the mother bobcat, poised and calm. Neither flinched, neither fled. They simply watched. A few heartbeats passed. Then the mother gave a low trill, soft and certain. Twig followed her lead, and together they slipped back into the underbrush. It was a goodbye, not born of necessity, but choice. They had returned not out of need, but to say something only silence could carry. And Hannah stood still in the quiet. That followed, her breath clouding in the golden air, knowing deep in her chest that for the rest of her life she would never forget the sound of that snow, the depth of that gaze, or the moment the wild looked her in the eye and said, "We remember, a gift from the forest. Some stories aren't told in words. They're written in tracks, in stillness, in the space between heartbeats." After they vanished for the last time, she didn't return to chopping wood. The axe stayed buried in the drift. She stood there motionless, thoughts quiet as the trees around her. She wasn't sad. She wasn't even surprised. What she felt was honored. It's not every day a wild creature comes back, not for food, not out of fear, but to say something sacred in a language beyond words. That moment, fleeting and clear, was punctuation. A quiet period at the end of a story she hadn't even realized she was telling. That evening, she sat at her oak desk, the one tucked beside the window overlooking the porch. The place where she had first seen Twig, small and shivering, curled, like a leaf against the cold, and she began to write, not a report, not even a journal, a letter, to no one, and to everyone. She titled it, "The Wild Knock Softly." She wrote about the morning she first heard the cry, blue eyes, trembling limbs, about the slow trust dance they shared on that porch, about warmth, patience, time. She described the mother, silent, proud, and impossibly restrained, who had waited and watched, and despite instinct had believed in her. By the time she finished, her tea was cold. She didn't send the letter, not yet, but she saved it, folded carefully, because someday, someone else, alone in the woods, might need to know this was possible. That wild hearts, even the fiercest, ones could choose peace. The days that followed were quiet again, but not the same quiet. She still left a bowl of water near the porch, just in case. She still walked to the edge of the clearing each morning, eyes scanning the trees. And sometimes, not always, she found tracks, two sets, never too close, but always there, always clear. They were still out there,